Hello, my name is Justice Forral with SCAR Media. Spokane City Council passed an ordinance to put landlords on a rental registry. I speak with City Council member Paul Dillon to find out what's the deal on this.
I'm here with standing City Council member. Hopefully it's going to be sitting City Council member because he is far too tall. Paul Dillon. Paul, if you'd like to have a seat, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, we're rolling. Oh, this is nice. This is interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Yeah. What would you like people to know about you?
When I was very young, my father convinced me that there was a number between 6 and 7 called Bleen. And that really messed me up. And my mom had to intervene and tell him, stop telling him about Bleen. It doesn't exist. And that took a long time to catch up in math. He drew like a fake symbol for it. And I'm still dealing with that.
Yeah, that's trauma.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to get that deep. This is SCAR issues, housing, evictions, and housing justice.
Yes.
And so one of the questions I've been trying to answer and find the answer to is how many people are living in rental homes?
Yeah, I think we know that there's over 40,000 units. That's estimated from some of the census data, as well as going through the rental registry process and an estimation on the number of units that we know are not registered. So that kind of painted, I think, a good picture of how many units that we have in the city. I think it was, about over 45,000.
So is it the city or the state that gives the lordship to these landlords?
That dates back, I believe, to feudal times. So that does predate my term on office.
People are talking about how important the landlord registry is.
Yes.
So does this mean they have to not live near schools and they have to inform their neighbors about the predatory behavior?
No.
What does it mean then?
So the landlord rental registry, it means that they need to register with the city. They need to have a business license, both with the city and state. I am of the mind that, if you are a landlord, then you are running a business. And so those rules should apply.
Is there any benefits for being on the landlord registry?
Yeah, you have more resources. It's, I think, increases the ability to coordinate with the city and really does, again, I think it helps everybody.
You want your lordship to be official. So what is the landlord responsible for?
Upkeep with the unit, providing, I think, a standard of living for the tenant and really overseeing the unit. I think that oftentimes we do think of landlords in often a homogenous way, but working on these policies, such as the rental notification, which creates a 3 months to 6 months rental notice, depending on how much you are raising rent, above or below 3%, as well as updates to the rental registry. I we got feedback from a lot of landlords that this isn't a big deal. We can comply with this, and we're happy to do it. We've registered our units, and we've started to see that. But of course, there's another component to this where you hear the sky is falling, everything is terrible. How dare you? You hate landlords. And I think, unfortunately, as we've seen, a lot of, I think, loudness in the dialogue can sometimes take out the oxygen from what is the real issues and what we're trying to do, and that's to provide a fair shot.
Yeah. Are you a renter or a homeowner?
I am a homeowner, but I was a renter for a long time, most of my life.
So you're a homeowner now.
Yes.
So what's it like to be the political elite?
It's not all it's cracked up to be justice. No, I feel very fortunate. I'm very privileged to be able to, buy a home.
Are there other things that can happen between landlords and tenants? I think to maybe make things easier on tenants and landlords have their list of issues.
I think the biggest thing is getting information to tenants and landlords. Anytime that you pass a law, there's so many people that don't know what it is. They don't know what it does, and that's not their fault. We have just a lot of societal information gaps, and so I think doing this really is a public service. It's hard to get to everybody. We're always trying, and we need to do more, quite frankly. So I hope someone watching this does know more about some of the laws that are on the books that would protect you as a tenant, and then landlords are also aware, because right now you can feel like you can pass the best policy, but if people aren't aware, then it doesn't matter. But you also, of course, have to listen to, landlords or people who might have concerns with the policy and meet them and address those head on. But at the end of the day, it's like going back to the old saying, like, oh, trust your gut. Like, that's certainly part of it. But if you can sort of see how this policy would be enacted and you hear stories, you look at the data, it's the right thing to do.
What are some of the impacts that you feel renters are facing right now?
I think a lot of renters are obviously still very rent burdened, so spending more than 1/3 of their income on rent. And the way that we have seen rents really skyrocket once the eviction moratorium expired during COVID, we saw rents vastly increase. And then we saw more evictions. And then, of course, people are wondering why we were seeing an increase in homelessness. And you can't untangle the two. There's so many people that are one paycheck away from being unhoused. And that is, again, I think a societal failing, and Spokane is not exempt from that. And we are starting to see more, landlords register their units, and we have increased staffing now with code enforcement after the city passed their last budget. And so my hope is that that is going to lead to a better standard of living.
If landlords are not on the registry, what happens?
Yeah. Currently, if they are not on the registry, then they are prevented from evicting a tenant. And so that was, I think, really important to put some teeth into the law that was passed by the previous council. Otherwise, it just remains status quo. And we still, at the time that we updated that with the language with the eviction prevention, we still had less than half of the units registered that we think in the city. So again, if you look at the data and you only have close to 50% of folks complying with the law, then you need to look at, okay, what are some measures that you can take?
So if I find a landlord who's not on the registry, I don't have to pay rent?
You still have to pay rent. That's a great question. But there is, again, they can't just evict somebody. You have to go through a litany of reasons to evict a tenant. It doesn't mean that you're prohibited from paying rent, but there's a lot of other causes for eviction that we see, unfortunately, that go beyond just not paying rent.
Are there any city resources that are used during the eviction process?
Yeah, if you go to our city website now, there's a whole kind of page around the different landlord tenant laws and resources that I would urge folks to check out. Maybe we can share that link.
Thank you for watching part 2, episode 1 of Housing, Evictions, and Housing Justice. Next episode, we'll be talking about how racial justice impacts housing justice and what we can do about it as individuals to advocate for renters in our area. Remember to like and subscribe or whatever, and follow the SCAR Weekly for local Spokane news. Thank you.
We want to talk about some of the other things you advocate for?
In addition to being on city council, I'm the political manager at Pro-Choice Washington. And that's kind of carrying over some of my work previously at Planned Parenthood of Greater Washington, North Idaho. And
so as a tall, handsome white man, is it hard to advocate for women's rights?
That's very nice that you think I'm handsome. I mean, I think everyone should be advocating for reproductive freedom. I mean, I came to this work as a patient and a volunteer, and really, I wanted to help just bring some of my experience, to this work, and but it's not about me. I mean, I really wanted to build up a strong advocacy team locally at Planned Parenthood that we just didn't have a lot of that infrastructure and coordination. And so I'm really proud of the work we've been able to do as a team and get some really huge wins. I loved your question for Terry about respect. That was really good.
You want to answer it too?
Sure.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What makes you feel respected?
That's tough. I feel like my answer 2 years ago would be very different than now being on city council, because you have people who might say kind things and they don't know you. And then you have a lot of people who hate you and you don't know them either. So you have to kind of treat both the same in a way. And what really matters is building a life and having family and friends, whether that's chosen family, and having that circle kind of outside, I think, a lot of politics. And that's where you feel respected and loved.
You have two different sets of groups, right? Ones that like you, ones that don't, but they don't really know you, or they don't really have any clear communication. What would be the best way to, I guess, bridge those gaps for those individuals?
Trying to meet. I mean, it sounds sort of maybe cliche or trite, but relationships honestly do matter. And Spokane can feel like a very small city and a big city at the same time. And so, I don't bite. I'm fine meeting with anybody anytime, and I really try and do my best to make myself available and meet folks where they're at. But that is a big part of it.